Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, a hilarious Game Boy game, a looked over shoot 'em up, and a movie game from a galaxy far, far away. Hi, I'm your host Jared, and today is November 11th, 1992. This video is brought to you by Dungeon Fighter Online. Dungeon Fighter Online is a 2D hack-and-slash MMORPG with retro pixel graphics filled with monsters to fight, dungeons to raid, loot to grab, and lots of leveling up. There are 16 unique characters that each branch out to 4 to 5 advancement classes, giving you tons of way to pummel enemies with spectacular hit effects from complex combos. Leveling up is fast to help you hit the maximum level of 110. New users can pair up with veterans for help clearing dungeons and raids, and both will get level 105 epic gear boxes and more. And if you get bored of that, there's now Dungeon Life Online, where you can build, gather, fish, and farm to develop your town. Dungeon Fighter Online is free to play. Click the link in the description down below to get a free coupon code to receive several goodies to help you on your new adventure. Once again, click the link in the description down below, try the game out for free, and once again, thank you to Dungeon Fighter Online for sponsoring this video. A long time ago, 30 years to be exact, the Super Nintendo saw the release of Super Star Wars.
Super Star Wars is a hit. From the burning deserts of Tatooine, the maze-like interior of a sandcrawler, the Mos Eisley Bar, to your final confrontation with the awesome Death Star. All the action from the movie is here, but the outcome is up to you. Do you have what it takes to take on the Empire? Find out with Super Star Wars, available now.
Super Star Wars is an action platformer following the events of Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. Play as Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Chewbacca through numerous levels based on the film. You'll start in the sands of Tatooine, acquire a lightsaber, fly off to the Death Star, and end with the final trench run. Gameplay is closer to something like Contra, where you're shooting away a constant barrage of enemies, powering up your blaster, and using screen-clearing grenades. There's also a handful of Mode 7 stages for variety, piloting Luke's Landspeeder and X-Wing. Super Star Wars is called Super, not strictly because it's Star Wars on the Super Nintendo, it's to help differentiate it from the previously released Star Wars for the NES, to help show that it's a different game. It was developed by Sculptured Software along with LucasArts, which naturally got them a lot of advantages during production. For example, Sculptured Software's in-house music composer, Paul Webb, was given the original sheet music that John Williams had created for the film's musical score. During development, there was some cut content. Originally, magazine scans showed that there was going to be a level based on the Death Star trash compactor that never made it in because the cartridge couldn't fit it. There were also ports being made for both the Sega Genesis and for the PC, both of which were canceled before the release, meaning a lot of Star Wars fans missed out. Although both of those canceled versions have now been leaked online. I actually hate this game. It's way too difficult with some infuriating platforming and unfun level design. Anyone who's tried to get past the sandcrawler stage knows exactly what I'm talking about. Despite it being a run and gun game, there are so many enemies that take multiple shots to kill that it's much better and safer to move at a snail's pace. You have to stand still to shoot, and jumping is really stilted and awkward. Also, I want to bring your attention to the title screen for Super Star Wars for a second. What is happening to Luke Skywalker's face? Why is his jaw unhinged and off to the side and practically melting off? Despite what I think, reviewers at the time loved it. GamePro magazine gave it a perfect score. Nintendo Power rated it with an average score of a 4.1 out of 5 and called it the 4th best SNES game of 1992, ahead of games like Soul Blazer and Super Mario Kart. Reviews used to make no sense at the time. Super Star Wars would eventually be followed up with, what else? Super Empire Strikes Back and Super Return of the Jedi. They remained exclusive to the SNES until they were put onto the Wii's Virtual Console service in 2009, and in 2015, a bundle of classic Star Wars games were ported to the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation Vita. It includes all of the SNES Star Wars games. In games that you've definitely never heard of, released this week for the Nintendo Game Boy, was Out of Gas. Out of Gas is a top-down space shooter of sorts where your ship is constantly running out of gas, flying around to find all the gas icons, many of which need to be collected in order, and use your cannons to shoot other enemies. Every time you take damage, you lose more gas, reducing the time you have to complete each level. It controls like the classic Asteroids game, only with puzzle elements, and it's stupid. The only real enjoyable part of the game is the cutscenes. Surprisingly well-animated cutscenes play in between each world, setting up the story of each level, which, as far as I can tell, is a space guy taking his space girlfriend out on a space drive, only oops, he's out of gas. He even gives the camera a thumbs up like, ha, now she has no choice but to make out with him. And there are so many layers of wrong here. Nobody likes this game. The kindest review out there was from Knabenbauer, who gave it a too high of a score of a 2.9 out of 5. But hey, the art style of the cutscenes sure are something. Out of Gas was developed by Real Time Associates, who you may know better for working on other games such as Elmo's Letter Adventure, Elmo's Number Journey, and the Nintendo 64 version of Gex Enter the Gecko. For an actually cool game released this week in 1992 was Firepower 2000 for the Super Nintendo. Firepower 2000 is a shoot-'em-up set during a war in the far future of 1997. The screen scrolls vertically as you blast away every single thing that comes your way. A major gameplay difference is that there are two playable vehicles: the helicopter, which plays very familiar to any other shoot-'em-up game, and the tank, which can shoot in all 8 directions but has to drive around enemies and obstacles and can jump. Also, during certain stages, you'll change vehicles entirely, like swapping to a speedboat. It also has 2-player support, allowing 1 player in each vehicle for some slightly different playstyles. It's actually a pretty cool game. It's easy to think that every shoot 'em up is like all the others, but there's enough variety with the vehicle selection to keep you engaged. Firepower 2000 is actually a sequel to a different game called Swiv, which was released for numerous PCs in 1991. Firepower 2000 was titled Super Swiv outside of the US. It would get ported to the Mega Drive in Europe in 1994 and renamed Mega Swiv, with a sequel on PC called Swiv 3D. Firepower 2000 got a surprising amount of coverage in gaming magazines. There were numerous advertisements for it, and Nintendo Power issue 44 had a multi-page walkthrough. And at release, Electronic Gaming Monthly rated it highly with 8s all around, except for one guy who gave it a 6, citing that breakup is a big no-no, which I don't actually know what that means, even in this context. Therefore, we can only assume that he's still bitter that he got dumped by Firepower 2000. And as for everything else this week, here's Editor Dylan.
This week, the SNES had X-Zone, which is our 3rd Super Scope game in a row. It's one of the more arcadey light gun games, which I enjoy, but apparently its hard mode is nearly impossible. So much so that the Wikipedia article even states there hasn't been a single recording of anyone beating it using original hardware. Sounds like a challenge to me. The other game that came out this week was Best of the Best Championship Karate. Now, I'm no expert, but isn't this kickboxing? I mean, I suppose they are both a form of martial arts where punching and kicking is involved. I just assumed it would look more like Karate Kid and everyone cosplays as Ryu. That was a joke. I was joking. Please don't karate kick my ass. Even the Japanese version of the game says kickboxing, so I feel like I'm missing something here. Enough of the semantics. The game released on 4 consoles, but the version I'm most interested in is the Genesis. Apparently, it features Sega Activator support. You know, the 90s version of Kinect, complete with wonky, unresponsive flailing. Only speculating since I've never actually tried it. But if you have, let us know if it actually functions. If it does, I'll eat my words. But I doubt it. Which leaves us with 8 games released on these 4 consoles this week in 1992. If you still happen to have your Super Scope lying around, a decent recording setup, and a lot of skill, you could upload a video of the first legitimate documented playthrough of X-Zone on hard difficulty. Oh, and update the wiki after you do. Good luck out there.
Thanks, Dylan. In the Collector's Corner, Super Star Wars released with a suggested retail price of $54.95. Now, the card alone is worth less than half of that, and complete is still only $40. Out of Gas is this week's biggest value gainer, despite it being dumb. A loose game cartridge goes for just over $25, and the ever-rare complete Game Boy box is just under $200. Firepower 2000, meanwhile, is at around $25 for a loose copy, and a complete one one is at a respectable $100. And that's it for today. Next week, a forgotten Capcom shooter, another movie game, and some spider senses are tingling. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. Please like the video and leave a comment down below and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much. What's the farthest you ever got in Super Star Wars as a kid? I remember getting past the Sandcrawler a couple of times, but I know I died a lot inside the Sandcrawler, and at that point I gave up and just used cheat codes to go see the other levels at the end.